All right, recording. My name is CJ Finley from Thrive on Life. This is our weekly lunch and learn with the ultimate goal of just helping people continuously learn and connect with each other. So everybody that's on here today, we'll be talking about ideas. So if you have ideas and somebody else you think can help somebody with their idea, please connect afterwards or even on here to help each other. This is all about growing communities and helping people connect with each other because we can do so much better and go so much further as a team. I'd like to welcome Genevieve. She's never been on one of these, so thank you for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Every person matters, so I really appreciate you tuning in, and thank you to everybody else who has shown up before and now shown up again. It means we're doing something a little bit right, so I appreciate you on that. Before I get started, we're always looking for speakers and people that want to teach things. This is an inclusive community where it's not really about how well you speak. Even if you've never public spoken before, this is an area where you can feel safe to get your ideas out there, present, and then get feedback from like-minded people. So if you're here to speak, please let me know. And then the best thing that you can do for me is tell other people if this was valuable to you, tell other people about it. We'll be doing this every single week, rain, sleet, shine. It's gonna be winter. I know some of you on the East Coast and in Boston. We don't get that here in Austin, but yeah, join us every Wednesday virtually through the cold, and let's continue to push that needle forward. So today's 70 degrees. Well, it's 73 here, okay? In today's chat, what we're going to be talking about is how to launch any idea within one day. One of the things I thought about as we're wrapping up this year, and I think a lot of people are going through, is with 2020, there's ideas are abundant. We have had a lot more time to be with ourselves over the course of this year. And I know, speaking from myself, I've had a bunch of different ideas. I've even reflected and realized like some of the things I've been working on, I don't even want to work on anymore. This whole group started because of COVID, kind of an idea of I've always wanted to be an educator and help with education reform. And I started thinking back, what's the lowest minimal viable product to do that? And it's, we have Zoom and we have Facebook Live and we have Instagram Live, just start doing it. And now we're here today. But I know that starting ideas and getting them actually out there can be extremely intimidating and tough. So I put together a little presentation to kind of help you with any idea you ever have and to realize what ideas are all about. So let me start sharing my screen and then we'll get right into the presentation. All right, this is always tricky. I never do myself a favor and close down my other slides. All right, let's present. Actually, I'm going to keep this open so I can see if anybody joins the Zoom. Sorry about that. I got too many things open. Awesome. So today's lunch and learn, how to launch any idea within one day. What is the goal of any idea? And this is an open-ended question that I'd like to ask you guys. So if you could just put in the chat, like in your eyes, when you have an idea, what is the goal of that idea? So for me, one of the ideas I have now and have been launching with Jake, who's sitting right here next to me, is the Honest Education podcast. So we had that idea, and then the goal of it, I'm not going to say because I don't want to give away kind of like where we're going with this, but I had a goal in mind with it. So when you have an idea, what is your immediate goal typically with those ideas? Feel free to put it in the chat, or if anybody wants to speak up. Expand human potential from Wyatt, lasting positive impact from Genevieve. I love these. Even if you just have a goal in the first place, that's a great start. So Joe is grow the business and brand and message to share and influence others. Charlotte, great responses. So just the fact of having a goal, you're already starting off better than most people. The next thing is, what do you believe is the biggest mistake you are making with your ideas? And then Chandler said gain awareness. So when you have ideas, what do you think you believe is the biggest mistake that you personally are making? And just feel free to get vulnerable here. Ideas, big ideas especially, are not easy. I'm going to start this combo off more of like what not to do with ideas compared to what to do with them, because we learn more from our mistakes than we do from all the successful people out there. Not thinking big enough, thinking they're too hard to achieve, overthinking, not knowing the first step of action. That's a great one. Limiting audience potential, maybe not believing in them or thinking they will take too long to achieve, thinking someone else can do better, not enough validation or market research. These are all amazing answers. I always like to keep it super simple. The biggest mistake everybody typically makes, and these kind of fit in all that, is believing other people care about your ideas as much as you do. We do all this research, we think about all these different things with our idea because we try to have a great idea from the start. That's why we do the research. That's why we do all the little things that actually limit us from the true goal of an idea. The goal of the idea is to just bring it to life. You should be selfishly thinking that if I lived on an island and no one else was around me and I didn't have research and I didn't have data and I didn't have anybody to tell me whether this is good or bad, I should narrow down to what is the least minimal viable product or service that I could create to get this idea off the ground. So the goal is to bring your ideas to life and do the work to turn them into greatness. Because of social media, because we can see all our friends that are quote unquote successful, when we have an idea, we tend as human beings to say, oh, like, how do I go from A to Z? When in reality, all you need to do is from A to 8.1 to 8.2, and then it's A through 10, then you get to B. And then it goes on so forward as you move through that progress. So when you have any idea, the number one thing you should be focusing on is, how do I just bring this idea to life as quickly as possible? And continue with that, how often do you let an idea stay inside your head, contemplating back and forth with what to do? We do this all the time, right? Like in any given day, I mean, you can just Google this. How many ideas do most people have throughout a day? A ton. With whether it's work, your life, your relationships, where you want to travel. You have so many different ideas. Now, why do we do this? Well, we leave them in our head because we want them to be seen as good to the outside world before we ever present them. And that's the biggest inhibitor. When the reality is, the longer an idea stays in our head, the potential for it to ever actually become something in real life becomes minuscule. The higher the chance it will stay there forever, the more you actually think about it rather than start doing. So I want you, after this talk, I want you to think about like the ideas you have. I want you to be selfish with those ideas. Take out people's criticisms, take out social media, take out whatever you're thinking about, and always think about what's that minimal viable thing to just get your idea out there, out of your head. Once it's out of your head, then it has a chance to get that feedback and iterate on top of that. So I wanted to start this off again with, what should you not do with your ideas, anything that you have, sitting around thinking about them. Think about how much time you waste just thinking, right? That's so much energy when in reality, imagine if you just put that same time in actually doing something, you're going to achieve the goal, which was to bring the idea to life. The way that you kind of get to that point is you have to let your ego go, where you believe that others care. And the reason that I used this picture of a tennis player is sports are a great microcosm for this. When you're an athlete, when I'm a young athlete, I'm like, I'm going to be the greatest, right? No one watches me because it's just an idea in my head. I actually have to put it out there and I have to do the work. As soon as I start doing the work and I start getting better and better, well, crowds start to come. They start to want to watch me. Before LeBron was LeBron, he had to put the work in the gym to become LeBron and have all the people around him. So the idea in his head didn't come to fruition until I'd say he's about 15 years old. For him, he struck it way quicker than a lot of us in his life. But think about your ideas now. The greatest idea you have, the faster you bring it to life, you still have 10 years probably till it's like that major success. Another example of this is even the platforms that we are on right now, Zoom, Facebook, where Facebook wasn't initially the idea that it is today. He just put it out there as a social platform in a college. It had nothing to do with global ads, running businesses through it. They didn't get to that point until he started with something very, very minimal and just putting his idea out there. So that's the biggest takeaway I want you to walk away from with this, is reducing your ego and making it known to yourself that nobody cares. Like, they do not care. You have to put the work in, and then 10 years down the road, people might care. The last thing is, don't do nothing, which is what most of us do. We end up wasting our energy thinking all day rather than doing. And if you continue that process year over year, you're not going to live a fulfilling life. Bringing your ideas to life, no matter how small or large they are, even if nobody sees them, brings fulfillment. And that's really, especially at Thrive, that's what we're after, is just bringing fulfillment through the work that we do. So if that's not what you should do, what should you do instead? You should take action and talk to people about your ideas. So this is where we kind of have a lot more fun with this discussion. I'd love for you to take literally 2 minutes and think about some of the ideas that you've had. Jeff, I know we were talking earlier about some of the ideas you have, but put those ideas in the chat. This is a safe space, so you can go as small or as large as you want. And nobody here is going to make fun of you for that idea. We're actually going to kind of dive into how do we make those things come to life. So I will put mine in there first. It's a great one, Speakers Network, and starting to build it out. Hell yeah. So for me, I want to build a school one day. It's one of my dreams to have a school where I can give a platform to different types of people to come in and teach real world principles. 10K members in the 1% Better Club. Awesome. Speak on preventative medicine, leadership development coaching, start a skate brand. Heck yeah. Jasmine's getting better, Elena. You already have your first ambassador. We got a few out here in Austin. Jake says, building a brand aimed to help young hustlers and dropouts. Any other ideas? Anybody have a huge idea? Like go to Mars, or have thought about it? We have my buddy Stefan on here. He wants to go to Mars. Jeff, I want to be able to download books to my brain. Well, Elon Musk is working on that. Mason Hopkins, go to Mars. I think there's a fund right now where you can pay $100,000 or something to go to space when that happens. Start my own annual conference. That's a big idea. Heck yeah. My buddy Zach from Live a Great Story, he did a conference last year. We can team up on that. I think there's a bunch of people on here that could help make a conference happen. Cool. So these are all amazing ideas. Cool. They're on paper now, though. Shit, it seems intimidating. What the hell do we do next? How do we bring them to life? The first step is get them out of your head at whatever cost that is. And I want to ask you this. How many times do you have an idea and you don't even write it in a journal? You don't do anything with it, ever. Now, there's people out there that 99.8% of the time, thank you, Jeff. I'd say 99.9 for me. I'm trying to do a better job at it. But there's entrepreneurs that actually have idea books that eventually they sell their ideas because they're actually good ideas. So all your ideas, the best thing that you can do is whenever you have an idea, have some type of system where you put them down. So that way, even if you go a month, you can look back at some old ideas, and maybe you don't have the money now for one of your ideas, but in 5 years you will. If you still have that idea in your back pocket and you can look back on it, you're going to be able to execute on it at a much more efficient rate. So what I'm going to do right now is kind of run through, let's see, what idea could we we're going to do Elena's. So we're going to build out a skate brand. So Elena, I'm going to call on you. So is your mic good today? Just making sure.
Yes, I think so.
Cool. Yeah. Was making sure you're not on the go or anything. So let me share. Wait, can you guys see the MindMap? Okay. So let me just start a new one. So we're going to call it, do you have a name for your skate brand?
Not yet. No.
Okay. We're going to call it no name skate brand. And I'm just going to do like a 5-minute live of what I highly recommend you do with every idea. And if you can see on the left, I do this with constantly ideas, products, software, services, all the time. And it's been super helpful for me to actually bring ideas to life really quickly, because I realize the biggest problem we all have is overwhelm. Once it's in your head, once you put it on paper, you realize, oh, I can actually do this. I can find people that can help me do this. So no name skate brand. The biggest thing, and I've run through this before, so we're not going to go too in depth with the why part today, but you want to figure out your why. So in one sentence, Elena, why do you want to start a skate brand?
I want to impact a community of people and make them feel confident in what they're wearing and what they're using to, I don't know, do their passion, skating.
I'll just provide clothes that make them feel confident in their abilities. Right. So you have your why. Then after that, I'm not going to go through the objective now, but figure out an objective. So an objective for Thrive is consulting, hosting Mighty Network, lunch and learns, masterminds. That's like my objective. Then you're going to have your core values. Now, again, this is more for if you're building a business rather than just a solo idea, but even having core values for an idea is great. Elaine, off the top of your head, what are like three core values you have? So some of ours are like community, empathy, respect, authenticity. Just really quickly.
Authenticity, loyalty, and community.
Okay. Loyalty. I like that one. Core values, loyalty. It's rare in today's working world, and community. Awesome. So now you have your why built out. The next thing is what. So this is where you're really just going to paint a picture. And we're only going to do like 2 minutes of this, but Elena, in the reality, if you were to do this on your own, anything you can think of that you'd ever want this skate brand to be, you write down first, and then you narrow down your map. So think of this as just a painting. So let's think on the top of your head, what are the biggest things you want the skate brand to become? So you mentioned clothes, so I would say fashion.
I want to design decks.
Deck designs. Awesome. What else?
Also, I was thinking of having like an indoor skate park type thing that's connected to a clothing store.
Some indoor skate park. Let's say clothing store. Anything else?
I don't know if it's related, but I also want a tattoo.
It's all related. Maybe you have a tattoo shop in your next to your skate park. Let's say tattoo shop. Okay, cool. Now, even this part's easy. These parts are kind of easy. The hardest part is your how. Now, this is where I've spent the most of my time, being the nerd that I am, is trying to help people figure out the how. Now, what, in your eyes, Elena, what do you need to do to bring those ideas to life? And I'll give you an example. So you're probably going to need a website, right?
Yeah.
So your how, one of the hows is technology. And then we would do, okay, what technology do I need? I need a website. What else do you think you're going to need? Let's see, email,
Instagram,
social media, right? What else do you think you're going to need? So you mentioned stores, you mentioned physical locations. What are you going to need for those? Real estate, right?
Yeah.
Real estate, right? I know you and Andrew were looking into that. And then the other thing is designs and fashion. What are you going to need for fashion?
I'm going to need clothes and designs.
Clothes. All right, let's do actual, what would that be?
Inventory.
Inventory, yeah. And storage.
Yeah.
Inventory, storage. So I don't want to bore you guys, so we're going to end there. But what you end up doing is, let me go back to, let me make sure nobody's trying to get into here. Jasmine is. Okay, cool. Inventory, yeah. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is list out your current constraints. So what we did here was, okay, we have for initial idea, and you guys can do this with any idea you ever have. And what I end up doing is, why am I echoing? Hopefully that stops. You have all these ideas, right? You have your what, you have your how. The next thing is we have constraints. So Elena, do you have the money right now to have the store, to have the inventory, to have the storage, to own a tattoo shop?
No.
No, right? Okay, so that's the inhibiting factor for most people. Like, oh, I don't have the money, so this idea can't come to life. Well, the cool thing is somebody else out there does have the money. Investors, friends, family. You need to figure out what your constraints are and build around those constraints and attack around your constraints. So if money is your constraint, the coolest thing you can do is, okay, if you need a website, how do you network with somebody that's really good at building websites? And how do you maybe barter for them? Maybe they need clothes. Maybe they need designs. Okay, cool. Now you got your website up. Email. How do you reach out to somebody that knows email or social media? What you want to be doing the first year of your idea is just building your network around the how. So I need to figure out general real estate, general inventory questions, general storage. How do I network with people in these areas? And you can literally list out. And this is a cool thing. Okay, my buddy Trav does this. My buddies Joe and Mike do this. Thrive does this. Real estate. Open House does this. Inventory. I know multiple people that have supplement brands that deal with inventory, so I can go to them. Storage, same thing. Supplements. So I'm listing out all the people that I know that can immediately help me. And within one day, I can get meetings set up with all these people, get all my constraints down, and ask them questions around the constraints. Like, what was the biggest inhibiting factor for your storage? What was the biggest inhibiting factor for your inventory, for your real estate, for social media? What were all the constraints that you're listing? And what I mean by constraints is time, money, knowledge. What are your constraints? And you want to operate your idea within those constraints and then build out around those. This is taken directly from Seth Godin. If you listen to his podcast on with Tim Ferriss, our minds as human beings, we operate so much better with constraints on us. That's why if you're given an exact time to be somewhere and the location, you're like, oh, I can do this. But if I said, hey, you get to travel the world for, like, right now, I tell you, you get to travel the world. Well, it's like, oh shit, where am I going to go? How much is it going to cost? It's very stressful and overwhelming because you don't have a constraint there. But if I said, hey, we're going to race to Miami, you know exactly, like, you're going to start looking up, okay, what's the fastest way to get to Miami? You already have the constraints set out, so that going back to Mason's, like, where to start with your constraints. That's the easiest way. Look at what makes you forced into a certain path to begin with. For all of us, we're in our early to mid to late 20s. The biggest constraints typically are money and time. We're working a lot. We're socially active. We have all these things that we want to do with our life, but because of college debt, because we haven't been working for 20 years yet and saving up, we have these two big constraints. What we can leverage, though, is we know how to pick up the phone. We know how to DM. We know how to do these other things. There's people out there that can help us with those other constraints. Never let money be your issue. I'll tell you that, because I've worked with investors. There's plenty of great investors out there that are looking to invest in great people, but they want to know that you have a plan. And a plan without action, that's an idea, is what I typically call it. That's what most people will do. They'll make a plan, they'll make this map, and then they won't actually do anything with it. So you want to turn that phase after you list out your constraints and work on your biggest domino. You want to take action on what thing could help you basically move everything across the board. Now, Elena, I'm going to ask you, in terms of your idea, when you look at this mind map, what do you think the biggest domino, meaning we have a set of dominoes, you don't want to just run around poking them all over one by one. You want to poke one that's going to knock down 50. When you look at this first little mind map that you have, what do you think your biggest domino would be? And there's no right answer here. It's just theoretical.
I think just starting my clothing line, because I've been thinking about it for so long, and I feel like if I just started that, it would just snowball into everything else.
Awesome. And I think from my perspective, I would say you're right on that. And the reason being is you need a brand. To start any of
Yeah.
this, you need some type of brand. And to get that brand off the ground, you need some type of skill to sell or to give to other people. And right now, you already have the ability to create clothes, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. So start there, build a brand around that. Then, meanwhile, you start slowly figuring out, okay, if I'm in fashion, I'm in this, how do I maybe make a couple deck designs and get a couple influencers skating on my deck design? The cool thing is, John Scotty right now is skating on a Thrive skateboard. So I've done that already. So you can make up a design and then send some boards to some people, maybe give them a discount. So you can start narrowing down all of these, but you want to start with your brand. So what's your brand called? What's the name of it? Get your website. If you don't have a website, it's kind of pointless to have social media because your social media can point you to that website to get fans, right? So you want to think like, what are the biggest dominoes? Most people, what they do is they do the opposite. They get on social media, they start selling before they focus on their big domino. So you want to focus on what is the biggest domino in your idea that kind of knocks down everything else, and you can work off of that. The next thing is delegate. So, Elena, when you look at this, do any friends come to mind that could potentially help you in any of these areas?
My sister Jasmine.
Awesome. Anybody else?
I mean, not that I know right now. I'm hoping to meet people when I move.
Oh, you should have listed, should have said 12 people. There's 12 people in this group right now that can help you in individual ways. We all have skills. We all have knowledge. We all done things. Your job then is to figure out who's on board with this idea. And that starts with, again, working on that big domino, bringing that brand to life, and then asking, hey, who would ever be interested in collaborating with me? And then delegation is the key to scaling any idea. So once you bring the idea to life, which I talked about a lot in the beginning of this, the biggest inhibiting factor is yourself. You only have 24 hours in a day. You can't do it all. And I've talked with so many entrepreneurs about this. The biggest thing is letting go of control. People want to control their ideas and what they're bringing to life, but it just never works. Like, you have to scale, and you can start right from the beginning of figuring out who in your circle would like to help you with idea, even if it's just showing up to a lunch and learn like this. Like, I ask my friends, like, hey, can you just show up to this? It helps me continue this idea, continue to keep this dream alive. Even if you just sign on and don't even listen, I don't care, right? Delegate tasks and things to people that believe in your product, but also be giving. Like, when you're talking about delegation, make sure you're putting in the work too. So anybody that I delegate to is somebody that I'd be willing to do work for as well. So that's kind of the core value that I've lived by, is anybody that's kind of doing work for me, I respect them enough that if they ask me to do work for them, I would do the same thing. One of the last things is testing your MVP, analyze the feedback, and iterate quickly. So, Elena, goal is get a brand name, maybe get a website, and get a logo or something. What is the very first thing you should do once you do that? Again, no right answer. Just what comes to your mind.
I mean, start the actual line.
Perfect. And here I have an idea for you. You start the line, you have the brand, you showcase it to this 12 people right here.
Mm-hmm.
Just show it off to people. Hey, who likes what I'm doing? Do you have any feedback? Do you know anybody that would be interested in this? We have a lot more access to getting things off the ground than we give ourselves credit for. You all have friends, you all have family members. You just have to stick your neck out there. And again, that comes from reducing your ego and saying, you know what, even though there's 12 people in here, I'm going to get 11 no's and maybe one yes. But the point isn't to just go in and try and get 12 yeses. The goal is to put myself out there, get feedback, and just make it to that 1% better, like Wyatt always says. The only way you get the 1% better is if you actually put yourself out there and learn what the 1% better actually means. So this is pretty much the fastest way to kind of like get anything. You saw kind of how I put that together. You can launch your idea within one day. You could create the logo, you can get the website. I've made a Squarespace within 1 hour before, and Jake and I have literally launched a podcast within 20 minutes. Logo, up on Apple, Spotify. But before we did that, we mapped out like, okay, where are we going with this? What are we trying to do? And then like we pressed launch on it. And then we figure it out as we go. Then we start asking ourselves questions and reducing our constraints that we initially put on ourselves. So what you want to do is map your ideas out, list your constraints, build rapport with others who are interested in your idea, and then start testing your MVP as quickly as possible. And by MVP, it's called a minimum viable product. So again, Google wasn't Google that we know it today when it first started. It was this one little HTML address that got people to go to it. Airbnb wasn't Airbnb. They were actually using blow-up mattresses and getting people to go to their own apartment to stay. It was called Air Bed and Breakfast first, and that's where they got the Airbnb from. The greater your chance your idea becomes reality if you can do these things. And at the end of the day, the idea coming to life is really what the goal is. It's not to make it great from the start, which is the inhibiting factor for everybody. So I hope this was helpful. I'm gonna stop sharing now. And I'd love to just start a discussion on anybody that potentially has an idea now and might need feedback on where you're going or what you're trying to do. I definitely have a couple ideas I'd love to pick your guys' brain on, but I would love to open the floor to anybody who has anything to say, to be honest. Was that helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful.
I got you in late. I'm sorry when I'm presenting.
No.
I
figured I was watching on Facebook, so
oh, okay.
It's okay. I was watching on Facebook while I wasn't in there, but I think that that's very helpful. I always love how you break stuff down into like bite-sized chunks, because I tend to like just look at the whole thing and I'm like, I'm so overwhelmed because I have to figure out everything, and I'm like, do I need to figure out everything right now? Not really.
It's impossible. Like, and
yeah.
This is just a reflection, kind of like what I went through of me fixing my own problem. I was always, honestly, before I got to Austin, I was always this idea guy. I mean, ask Jeff is on the call now. We used to have weekly phone calls on Sunday nights, me and 4 other buddies, and we would just talk about ideas, like for an hour. But Jeff, did we ever do anything with him? I don't even remember what we were talking about.
No, not really. Just sit there and catch up, gossip, like little. But nothing really came until we jumped at a few ideas, and the blogs, I think, were the biggest thing. Like actually writing it out and putting it into the world is when action actually came out.
Yeah. So funny story. Before I had a blog, before I had a brand, anything, I was scared to put things out there. So I created a blog on Wix.com that I didn't show to anybody except for Jeff and my wife. And that lasted for 6 months. I wrote for 6 months, never showed a single person. And then I don't know really what inspired to just say, fuck it and go for it. But we ended up doing it. And then once it went live, like I would pick Jeff's brain on like where to go from here, like week over week. And another long story short, this office exists and the interns exist because my mentor, investor, ended up reading one of my blogs on LinkedIn. So those Sunday phone calls that we just kind of shot the shit with ideas eventually turned into a blog, which eventually turned into meeting somebody that changed my life forever, and is hopefully changing other people's lives forever. But I'd love to know what you guys are potentially working on. Genevieve, I know you got a couple ideas. We've been chatting offline, but was this helpful for you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was just thinking, like, as you were like, oh, like, I was just thinking, what are my ideas? And I'm thinking in my mind's eye, like, I've had so many ideas just pop in my head, and I instantly am like, like, whatever, like, that's just not going to work for me because I'm a perfectionist. So it's difficult to sometimes just like sit down and like, even if it's not the best idea, it could be if I just took the time to actually like try instead of just tell myself I couldn't. So even while we were just going through this, I like jotted down a bunch of stuff I like hadn't thought about, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there's so many things I actually do want to do. Like I could.
Can you share one?
Yeah, I literally wrote down like 10. So I was thinking, like, I'm big into preventative medicine. I'm a nurse by trade, and it's really hard to see people be sick later in life, and it's something that they could have maybe stopped. So I was thinking like maybe a summer camp that could be centered around health, wellness, and mindfulness. But it could be either for kids, right? That would be probably my target audience, but even for adults and couples, I think it would be really fun. Summer camp is kind of something people love a lot. So really like an adult retreat as well as like a kids summer camp. Make a mindfulness and wellness planner, meditation and journaling accountability group, coach women in sports. Like there's
So
just like, I wrote all this stuff down. I'm about to mind map for hours. So
I love it because what you just said. So if you create, I've done a retreat before, and one of the things you can do is combined ideas. So you talked about a planner. What you can do is show up to the retreat with a planner. Yeah. And the cool thing is, don't go into the retreat saying this is going to be the next $1 million idea. Go into the retreat because you just want to say, I want to run a retreat and I want to get my planner out there to a couple people.
Right.
Don't, like, stop it at that, because then the people are going to be like, oh, this is a cool planner. You could do this with it, or you could do this with the retreat. Once I ran the retreat, people started telling me where it should actually go. So just that minimum viable thing. And the retreat could literally just be you rent an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere and get 10 of your friends to go, right? They're your biggest fans. And then you ask them for ideas at the end, like, hey, what could I do with this idea? And they're the ones that are going to guide you along the path. So I love that. Jeff, any takeaways from this?
So we've done a mind map before, and it was really helpful just to see like the components that go into creating your idea or making it come to life. I would say there's so many books out there, man. Like you can read about like the magic of thinking big, or just having like a positive mindset, or even like James Altucher, I think, talks about, you know, he has like a notepad that he uses, that he writes 10 ideas down a day or more. And it just like helps you to build that muscle in your brain that like you might have a lot of bad ideas, but there might be a few that are really good. And that might stem off of something that you've like previously talked about or thought about. There's, what else is there? Yeah, I think it's just extremely helpful just to be able to like talk through it with somebody else, to poke holes in it. And then what we talked about in the beginning, like do your market research. Like, is this a problem that can solve a lot of people's problems, or so on, right?
And you bring up a great point. I didn't get into this in the discussion. Determining whether it's a hobby idea or a business idea right from the get-go. So if you do that, you take the pressure off. If it's going to be a business idea, it needs to make money. If it's a hobby idea, it's more so, I just want to get this out into the world and have fun with it and see what happens. So take the pressure off yourself right from the get-go and say, could this potentially be a business, or could this be more of a hobby? So a good instance is like, again, to reference back to the new little podcast I put out. The first podcast I have, the Thrive on Life, that I want to be my career, like talking with people across the world on like how to thrive. But the Honest Education one is more of like a side project where it's just more creative. How can I talk to people and help people get educated, right? There's no pressure on it. So I determined that in my head before I even kind of put it out there. Now, could it turn into a business one day? Yes. But like, I'm not putting that pressure on me. So you're going to go different paths depending on how you kind of narrow your constraints. That's another constraint. Like, this is a business idea, it needs to make money. If it doesn't make money within 6 months, I'm going on to the next idea. So there's a great book called Essentialism. If you guys haven't listened or read it, it helps you learn that do ideas fast and let go of them fast. The people that get in big trouble are the ones that spend 5 years on a bad idea because their ego gets in the way. Mason, what was your biggest takeaway from this? And any feedback or pointers? I always love your points, so I got to call on you.
Well, I think one thing I found useful was the mind map. I know I've seen you kind of bring it up multiple times, and I haven't really done that myself, but really just getting it down on paper is the biggest thing, right? Because when it's kind of abstract in your head, it's not that useful, but the second you start making it physical, it kind of brings it into the world, right? So that kind of is a way to start the momentum and kind of, I guess, cross that boundary of like it still being an idea to it's something being actively worked on, which I think is the useful first step. And
it's amazing. And I'll tell you why that's so important. Confidence. So for me, one of the reasons I mind map is when I go into a lot of my consulting meetings, if I have a mind map of what needs to get done, where it needs to go, I'm confident in that approach confidence begets confidence. So when you're hanging around other people and you can confidently say, hey, this is the idea I have, the quicker that they can understand your idea, the more confident they're going to be in you. If you talk about your idea and they don't understand it, they're going to be like, this guy is batshit crazy. Like, I'm sorry. But with investors, like what they want to see is they invest in people, not necessarily the ideas, right? So they want to understand, you know, your idea so well that you can execute on it. And if you can mind map out, okay, here's my big dominoes. This is what I'm going to work on first. I'm going to network with these people. Here's how money is going to help me. You can immediately get that investor to understand it. It's like essentially putting things in the 5th grade terms. So putting it on that paper, what I found for me is essentially building the confidence so that I have checked all the things that I needed to check. And when I talk to somebody else, it helps them trust me very, very quickly in whatever we're talking about, because it's not just me just talking. Because when we're talking, one, I'm very self-aware. I talk very fast. So a lot of people like stare at me with blank eyes, like a lot of times. So I'm like, if I make this map, then we can slowly go through, hey, do you understand this portion? Yes or no? If not, like, I need to make more on this map. And then we just keep walking through it. So as you're building this ideas, again, going to number 4 of delegation, these maps are so great for building teams. Like, you're going to need a team. And Mason, for your idea of like of the bold, when you're getting people involved, if you just have this mind map of like where you're trying to go and you're starting to build a team, I can look, if I'm an intelligent person, I can look within 5 minutes and be like, oh, I kind of understand where you're going with this. I know where sorry, I put myself on mute on accident. It's helped a lot over the years for that. Is that my elevator pitch? What do you mean by that, Jeff? All right, Joe is gonna share one of his ideas. He was just eating.
This was good, man.
Getting the gains.
Yeah, I had to break the fast. I was way too hungry, so I was listening the whole time, but I had to break the fast. It was like 17 hours. So yeah, man, this was great. I think one of the things that came up for me is like timing on ideas. Like some ideas, I'm like, oh, I need to start that now. Like one thing you and me, CJ, we talked about was like my email list, and that's going to be my focus for like the next year. Is just building my email list, and like that was an idea for you and me where it's like we talked about it back in like June, but I was like, I'm just not. I don't know, there's some work that would need to be put into place. And then I came down here at the beginning of September, the timing was right, boom, we put it into action. Now I got my email list, I got an automation, all that shit, put it together. So like, I think timing's a big thing. And another thing for me as well, it's like, hey, I'd love to write another book on becoming a professional speaker, but that's not a book that's going to get written until like my business is thriving, like 5 to 10 years down the line, I'm doing this full time, right? So I think that delineation is huge, and I'd love to hear you speak to that. But yeah, one thing that came up was, again, CJ, this was something I thought was going to be a longer term vision for me in my business, MII Professional Speaking, is like building a speakers network. And how this came about was like, so I, like you mentioned, do a lot of cold calling and cold emailing. My work's in like human optimization, personal, professional development. I call a meeting planner and they say, hey, we're looking for a leadership development speaker. In the past, it's like, hey, I'm not a leadership development speaker. I can't help you out. But if I build out a speakers network and I represent someone who's a leadership development speaker in the college market, like Jevin and how we're starting to get him onboarded, then I can say, hey, I'm not a leadership development speaker, but let me refer you over to my buddy. Let's set up a Zoom call with a speaker that I represent. Jevin gets the business. I provide her value. Maybe I take a very small cut, so I'm making a little money. But more importantly, I like can provide her and her students value as opposed to saying, sorry, I can't help you out. Good luck. You know, so it's like you continue the relationship. And yeah, man, I think just starting that idea and just getting into it, timing was right. And now we're building it out. And like, it was crazy. It was just like, you know, I connected with Jevin, I connected with Hamza, and it's like, boom, it's just, this was, again, something I thought was going to be longer term and that was going to be built down the line. But, you know, I got down here to Austin a couple months ago and I connected with some people, right? We talked about those constraints. Like a lot of it was, you know, networking and having people, speakers that I could trust and send the business to, because it's still going to be representing me and my brand. And once I got that, then it's just like putting in the work to share the knowledge of like starting their business with, or starting a speaking business with Jevin and Hamza. So, yeah, I mean, it's just exciting. I mean, it's something that I'm building out. And then also, kind of speaks to like, you know, MII is going to be bigger than just me, which is what I wanted it to be, you know, right? So I've been building it up for like 2 years and it's just been me like on my own. Now, again, I mean, we already have some speaking opportunities that hopefully Jevin or Hamza will get booked for. And it's like, damn, that's exciting. And I'm helping them out. I'm helping the decision makers out. We're providing value all around the board. It's a win-win-win for everyone. So yeah, man, it's just crazy. I want to definitely thank you for like, hey, you should start a speakers network. And I was like, yeah, no, I will, like for sure. Like, you know, I will down the line when the time's right. But the time was right and it made sense and it just kind of came together. So it's exciting. And it's I think something as well as like something I've realized is in all aspects of my life, it's like when you start to create stuff and you have an idea and you show yourself that you can make it happen. Like for me, like getting paid to speak. And it took like a year and a half, but like the fact that I can do that, now I think about building my email list from 0 to thousands. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. You know, like you talked about confidence, right, CJ? It's like that stuff just compounds on itself. Oh, I already created a business and I got paid to speak out of nothing. I can create an email list out of nothing. I can create a speakers network out of nothing. I can create a conference out of nothing. Like whatever. I mean, and that's all aspects of life. So I love that. And I love this, like just this, the concept of this presentation. I think it was really helpful.
I appreciate you, and congrats on getting that off the ground. And consider me, I'd love to speak, and I'll give you my full cut. So yeah, going back to your question on the timeliness of things, I think that's a huge thing for a lot of people. And what I recommend, I mean, you don't have to do it as much as I do. But I mean, I've mapped my life. So I map out, when you're talking books, like I want to have multiple books where it's like Thrive on Life, Thrive on Fitness, Thrive on Health, Thrive on Relationships. It's like a series. And I started thinking, what is the minimum viable entry into that market, which would be some type of 50-page to 100-page, more of a mindset book, because I can speak to mindset in my life right now through my 20s and how my mindset has changed, but I can't speak to like being a father. So I'm missing out a huge market. I know I want to have kids in my mid 30s and in my 40s. So I should write a book more about like relationships and stuff like that when I'm a little bit older. So I'm mapping out that doesn't mean I don't have the idea though. And the idea's in my head and it's written down and I've mapped out where I want to go with everything. But I've mapped out like which years are important for me to work on certain ideas. And you mentioned the email list, and this is something that I recommend everybody. Like the day you should have started an email list is yesterday. Because if you're in a business, you're always going to need a list. Like I have thousands of people that I can email for different things, all segmented in different areas for different projects and for different things. I can make things happen very quickly compared to most people because I've just segmented the different lists over the years. So if you're thinking about creating anything, just start today and start writing today. And again, remember, the idea isn't really what matters. It's get the list out there and grow. Make your goal, I just want one new list member per week. You do that over the course of a year, you got 50. Over 2 years, you already got 100. You're going to grow at a much faster rate than that. But like when you break it down to that, thank you, Genevieve. Have a wonderful day. When you break it down to that, it makes it much more tangible. Like when I tell you, just get one new list member this week, you're like, oh, I can do that. But if I told you 1,000, you're like, oh, that's overwhelming. But then once you start getting 50 and you get 100 and you get 200, it's way easier to get to 1,000. Because if you have 200 people and you say, hey, I'm doing a giveaway right now, can you refer some people onto the platform? That's all I need right now to enter. You're going to have 200 loyal people referring you now. Then you turn into 400 really quick. Then you turn into 800 really quick. And the reason I'm saying this is because of your speaker network, you're doing exactly kind of like what we mapped out. Who do you already know? So you look at you, if you were to make that mind map, who do you know that likes to speak already, that you have a skill that they need? So for me, I'm so busy building the business. Like I don't have time to like reach out for these gigs to speak. So if you were able to get me speaking engagements and they paid me 1,000, I would literally give you 900 and I'll take $100 because my goal ultimately is just to speak. It's not even that $1,000. So it's finding the areas of life where you provide value mutually to each person, where I want to get up on stage more. I want to speak more because I know that helps Jake, who's here, Jasmine, John. It helps us get more gigs all around. So I need to put myself out there. It's my next level, but I don't need the money from it right now. So how do I partner with someone like Joe who can get me on podcasts, get me on these things? And you can take all all the monetary value from that, and I'll take the what I call collateral value, which is I get the people looking at me when I'm talking, and then they get on my email list, they get on my platforms, they come to these lunch and learns, and then they buy from me later on down the line. But that all started with even how we're here right now 5 months ago, where the goal was to have, we had lunch and learns in here, and then COVID hit. Then I was like, shit, what do I do? Like, I had no clue. So then I go, what's the minimum viable to this? Well, I have friends who are really skilled at what they do. Why don't we just start teaching online and see what that turns into? And now we're here. So that's the coolest part of what you broke down, is literally how I recommend it to everybody is Hamza and Jevin, who are already close to you in communication, meaning like you know of them, you can DM them, they have the same passions as you, and then you say the minimum viable to this is let's just lock up 1 gig. Let's get 1 gig for you. Don't even think past that. So it's awesome to hear you say that. And then to wrap up the timeliness thing, I recommend, again, everybody kind of map out where you want to be in your life, and then how does your actions just align to that, and realizing that your ideas don't have to happen today. Man, the school, like I want to build a school. I know that's not going to happen until I'm like 50, but it's still there. This is an example. When we're all 50 and all of you are super successful, and I say, hey, would you guys donate $1,000 check to my school to give these underprivileged kids their books and their stuff like that, you're probably going to write the check. But it started 25 years in the making by just putting the idea out there. So that's the coolest thing. But again, I don't want to ramble. It's 1 o'clock. I'll stay on a little longer if anybody else does, or if we have any other questions. I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, we can wrap up. Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate each and every one of you. If you tuned in on Facebook Live and saw us there, I appreciate you. It's been a hell of a ride. We're getting into Thanksgiving, and this month has been a month of gratitude for me. And I just want to say I'm really, really grateful for all of you. I'm also vulnerable and honest in times. Last week, I was kind of on a downer because we didn't get as many people showing up. I was assuming it was because of the election and stuff like that. But for you guys that came out today, I put together this last minute kind of thing, because I told myself it's more about the journey than it is, again, getting the people on here. So I appreciate you showing up and bringing the vibes. It's boosted me. So I appreciate it. I hope all of you have a wonderful day. Thrive on.
Yo.
Hold up. Let me stop recording real quick.